All right, so in the first session, we started by going over the new grammar portion of the crisp components. And we talked a lot about memory work, and we read some of those wonderful articles at the beginning of the Foundations Guide, which I recommend everybody read every single year. Guys, they have written so many good articles in all of their curriculums, in the Essentials curriculum, Challenge. You should read them, and you should read them every year, because there's actually something that popped out of one of the articles yesterday that I've read 16 times that I hadn't noticed before. So you just never know what you might notice in that season of your life that year. So those pages are really wonderful, and especially as a director, because you're going to talk to parents who don't understand the point or the beauty or the great, wonderful things about memorization. And so especially in the Foundations program, it's important to understand why we memorize, because that is such a huge part of the Foundations program. So it was really fun to talk through all of that. And we talked about, like, well, how do you answer parents' concerns, and how do you talk to them and stuff like that. So that was wonderful. And let's see, I'm looking at my notes. We also modeled a conversation that really is more for parents to have at home, because there's just not time to have conversations during the Foundations morning. But it's kind of using this new thing. I don't even know what to call it, but you might have seen it at Practicum, where you talk about the task being asked, what resources you'll use, what curriculum you'll use, which skill are you working on with that, and what art of grammar will it help you become proficient in. And so we talked through an example of, like, European rivers in week 4 of cycle 2. And a conversation that you could have about those is, what do you see? How similar is it to last week's memory work? How different is it? What do you notice about this group of rivers? Are they all the same length? Do they lead to the same bodies of water? So I thought that was really interesting. I've never had conversations quite like that along the lines of the memory work. So it kind of inspired me to just start having more conversations like that at home. So again, the tutors really do not have time to do that in class, but they might the first couple weeks during review time, because there's a lot of extra time because there's not as much to review. So we really emphasize that, though, like, make sure the tutors remember it's not a teaching time, it's not a conversation time. There's too much to get through. Okay, and then So then we talked through how do you locate, how do you find or identify a tutor. And a lot of the great ideas were, one of my favorites is asking your tutors who you think would be a great tutor. In my community, that's actually like an ongoing conversation. My tutors just know, and they just share with me without me even asking, like, so-and-so is so great in class, they would make such a great tutor. So I don't have to actually solicit that myself in my community. It's just people are telling me that all the time. Once in a blue moon, I'll have a parent themselves say, I think I would like to tutor someday, but that has actually been really rare in my 8 years of directing. So I would say that it's going to be more of a, maybe even at a tutor meeting, saying, who are the parents in your class who you see as potential tutor material? And then I really like to get them substituting as soon as possible, because if you're ready to ask somebody, would you be willing to tutor next year, and they have had the opportunity to substitute and see that it's not so daunting, it's doable, maybe even fun for them, that it's going to be a lot easier to get them to a yes. So we work really hard in my community to get people substituting who we think would make good tutors. And I maintain that I think almost any parent can be a successful Foundations tutor. So unless there are some really glaring reasons why not, such as they can't agree with the statement of faith, or just something going on in their family that is really, somebody is sick or something like that, taking care of an elderly parent, then I really think any parent can do a great job with Foundations tutoring. I have talked about this before, but it's been a really long time. So I am talking about things like if somebody's like, I'm not organized enough, or I don't like to sing, or I don't know how to do all those creative things, or I don't think I have enough bandwidth, or I'm already too busy, or something like that. All of those reasons are the ones that I'm like, you can do it. It doesn't take as much time as you think. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's already so many resources out there. Yada, yada, yada. So I've created, years ago actually, I created with the help of my tutors at that time, basically like a long letter about hesitations that people have to tutor and sort of answering those. So I have shared that with a lot of people. I think you can find that. I know that you can find that at my shared Google folder that you can find on at my profile. In my profile, there you go. So that's a good thing to check out if you're struggling to get yeses. We also talked about how it's kind of a new thing. I think it's new, and almost nobody in our group had, out of 27, there were like 2 or 3 who had ever done this kind of thing before. But we are now being asked to formally assess our tutors. And that includes visiting their class, kind of writing something up, and there's something in the tutor binder, I believe it's on page D21 or D23, I think, is the sample format sort of that we can use. It's got like some specific questions we can ask and fill out, and then having a meeting with that tutor to go over that write up. So that's what a formal assessment means according to our director binder. And Heather Mangum wanted me to make sure I told people that there is some discrepancy or contradiction between some of the various, like the MLA and the director binder, but that the correct thing is we are to do those formal assessments once per semester per tutor. So we talked briefly about that, kind of more just setting up the expectations, because most of us had not done it before. But I think the thing that I'm going to try and keep in mind, because it does sound hard to potentially have uncomfortable conversations, but I know that it will get easier. And I know also that once you've had a conversation with a particular tutor and it actually goes okay, you're not going to feel as nervous to do that particular tutor's assessment again. And they'll feel the same way. Your tutors will probably be pretty nervous their first meeting with you, but then after they see, oh, this actually wasn't so bad, and actually I got really great feedback, they will probably be greatly put at ease for their future ones as well. So this is kind of just something that we kind of need to suck up and just do. And I do believe that it will be for the betterment of our communities, and it will increase the quality of the tutoring and increase the quality of our directoring, because the better we get at doing hard things and saying hard things, if we can get good at saying hard things to our tutors when needed, we're also saying lots of really good things. Okay, so don't get me wrong, this isn't about criticizing, this is just about giving feedback. But the better we can get at doing that, the easier it will be to say hard things in other situations when that is needed. So I really do think that this is going to be a good thing. Although honestly, I can't say that I'm looking forward to it, but I do think it's a good thing. We also talked about classroom management and how you engage disengaged kids, and how do you quiet down talkers, and what does an ideal foundations morning look like? How about an ideal essentials class? And a lot of our discussion ended up centering around partnering with the parents and setting really, really clear expectations about what's expected in each class. And we also had some discussions. There were a few directors who had some really catchy, and I don't have my notebooks, I can't share them, I'm sorry, but a couple little really catchy things that they sort of established with their community-wide, that they would go over every week in opening, is what it sounded like. They would remind people, this is what I'm looking for. And so when that director would be around the kids, she might call people out on those specifics. And then when it comes to each tutor, I've not always, but I've come to realize and recognize that different tutors have different thresholds for behavior. It's just a reality that some tutors don't mind a little bit more chaos, whereas some need order. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Now, if I have a parent in a class with a tutor that likes or doesn't mind a little bit more chaos, and she's struggling with that chaos, that might be a situation where I encourage that parent to, step in and help a little bit more to decrease some chaos. Maybe I ask that parent if she can spend a little bit more time in other classes so that she's not face to face with that chaos as frequently. I might talk to the tutor and about specific things if the parent has specific issues, or encourage the parent to talk to the tutor. So that would be more on a case-by-case basis. But, the same can be said for a tutor who likes a ton of order. Is some parents may feel like that is a little bit too strict. I haven't actually had that situation as often as I've had the other one, but I haven't had the other one overly much either. So I always kind of emphasize, I want the tutor to feel comfortable in class and to not feel themselves like everything is out of control. So whatever their threshold is, I want them to feel comfortable with how things are. And if they're not, then I partner with her and we partner with the parents to figure out how to get it into better shape. So if there are specific students who are really struggling, and my own kid, one particular, has been a problem in multiple classes. That was when he was a lot younger. But I had to meet with the tutor one-on-one and talk about just my kid. And that wasn't me as a director, that was me as a parent, and come up with very specific plans for how we would help manage my child's behavior in class. So it really is partnering with the parents and coming up with a plan when it's needed, and making sure the tutors know that you as the director have their back and want to help them. And I don't ever want to leave a tutor miserable. And also, I don't ever want to be shocked to hear that some kid is really struggling, because if that is a shock, it means you've not been visiting classes enough. You don't know what's going on. So it really is a responsibility, in my opinion, of the FE director to know what's going on, to be in the classes enough to see things, so that if they come to you with like, this is really tough, you'd be like, I could see that. I could see how that would be tough for you, because I've witnessed it too. Anywho, on to the next thing. We talked about presentations next, and I think people were surprised when I shared that we actually spend a lot of time talking about presentations in my tutor meetings. And it's because I think sometimes, and this was really good to kind of get the plumb line back right about presentations, because I think the spirit and the goal of presentations, coming from CC, is just presentation skills. And while I have known that, and while I have preached that to my tutors, it still happens every year that certain tutors will get frustrated about kids doing either the same type of presentation every week, or will appear unprepared every single week. I'm talking about habitual things, okay? Not one-offs, habitual things. Or they will do something that doesn't really require talking, or something along those lines. I have every single year tutors that get really frustrated. So this discussion was really helpful, because it kind of reminded all of us that it is not about the content. And this is all in that presentation article that's in the Foundations Guide on page 79. So go read that again and be reminded that this is just about presentation skills. It's not about the content. So if a kid wants to read their essentials paper every single week, they can. That's a specific one that's been a bit of a pain point for one or two of my tutors in the past. But this is the thing that I really liked, and will help equip my tutors to do better going forward. If they're feeling frustrated about a specific student doing the same whatever every week, that is when you partner with the parent and you go to that parent and say, I just wanted to make sure you were aware they're reading their essentials paper every week, and I really think they could do more. I think they could do a great job on a different topic, or I think you could recommend, like, especially most kids could level up reading their essentials paper by reading their essentials paper from the KWO. So that would be a really, really good recommendation to say, I see that they love to do their essentials paper. Could we raise the bar a tiny bit and have them present from their KWO instead of reading their paper? But that also gives the parent the opportunity to say, you know, my kid just loves writing, and because our essentials class is so large, they don't get a chance to share their paper every week. And so it's so meaningful to them to get to read their paper. So getting to have that conversation with the parent and making sure the parent is aware and encouraging them to level up when you think the kid, or when the tutor thinks the kid is capable. But then ultimately it is up to the parent. It is up to the parent. So we can recommend working on different specific skills, presentation skills. So if they're gonna do the same thing every week, then you could say, okay, I'm noticing they're doing a different animal every single week, which seems redundant or whatever. But what if you worked on, maybe you wouldn't say that to the parent, but maybe you would just say, I'm noticing, you know, he's coming prepared, but are you working on any particular skills? Like having a conversation with the parent to find out what they're working on, what is meaningful to them. A lot of parents might honestly not be particularly working on anything specific, but having a conversation about it will help you or a tutor move towards that. Well, how about if we work on this specific thing? I noticed that he fidgets a lot. So what if, you know, in practice at home, you help him to stand still or something like that. So anyway, all this to say, really having a conversation with the parents about presentations. And ultimately, if you have a tutor who's kind of getting upset about how presentations are coming in, to just calm them down and encourage them to talk to the parents, but then ultimately they need to let it go because it's not up to them. It's up to the parent. So yeah, and look, that's my longest video yet because I don't know what it is. It's just presentations. There's a lot to talk about. And I will say, I've heard time and time again that this is one of people's favorite parts of the Foundations program. So I would hope that those people are spending more time, because I do firmly believe that planning ahead and practicing in advance will really level up your presentation skills. And all of this is not even to talk about audience skills, which was also brought up yesterday, but I think the presentation skills are the most important part here. The next thing we talked about was tutor meetings. We talked about kind of like when do you do them? When do you hold them? I was actually really surprised to hear some people's quarterly tutor meetings are only 1 hour. A lot of people's were only 2. For years, my tutor meetings were 4 hours, and I got them down to 3 after a lot of experience. We do ours on Saturday mornings. I would say more people did theirs in the evenings. And that is a director personality thing, because I just know I am so not an evening person that I very much shut down. My body just starts to be like, I'm done by at latest 9. So I know that I wouldn't have as quality of a tutor meeting if it was in the evening. Now, you could say the same thing about mornings, like a tutor having to go to a morning meeting. But this is where it just comes down to, we aren't going to find a perfect situation for everyone. So if I'm the one that's putting in the preparation and the time to present all this stuff, then I need to make sure that I am alert and awake. So we've always done it on Saturday mornings. That also means I don't need to provide childcare. Once in a blue moon, I'll have a tutor be like, my husband's out of town, I don't know what to do with my kids. And I let them bring their kids and they play upstairs, but that has been very rare over the years. So generally the kids stay home with dad on a Saturday morning. It's early, they're done by lunch, and so it doesn't take up their whole weekend. I feel really strongly about this. I put out the tutor meetings in April or May. And I say, these are the tutor meetings for next year. Here's all 4. Here's the dates for all 4. They will be from 8 to 12, Saturday mornings, at my house. Let me know now if you already know you have a conflict. Otherwise, I will expect you to be there. And this has served me super, super well. I have had plenty of tutors get sick. They end up calling in usually and doing like FaceTime or Zoom or something to still take part in the meeting. It's definitely not as good as being there in person, but this has all served me really, really well over the years. So I personally do not spend a lot of time. I don't spend any time sort of gathering people's availability. I'm like, here are the dates. I need you to be there. And I'm giving them to them so far in advance that I don't feel like that's too much to ask. So I know though, because of yesterday and being with 27 other directors, that a lot of people do a lot of things differently, and that is fine. I am just sharing what I do because like I said, I didn't share with the group yesterday very much at all about what I do. So I'm sharing it now. Ant crawling on me. We also talked about how do you include essentials tutors in your quarterly meetings. There does not seem to be a guideline of like asking us as directors to have quarterly meetings with essentials tutors. But it's more of a thing of including the essentials tutors so that they feel like part of the leadership team. So a lot of the directors here do include the essentials tutors in the foundation's quarterly meetings. And my favorite idea that I heard that we might try to implement this year was that they have the essentials tutors come to the quarterly meetings. The beginning part, they're all together, where like, for instance, in my meetings, we fellowship, we share prayer requests, we pray for one another. And then after that, they could break off and go to another place in the house. And like, if you have more than one essentials tutor, they could actually plan the next quarter together and share ideas or whatever. And especially if you have a new essentials tutor and an experienced one, I could see that time being so fruitful. If you don't have two, or if one of them isn't there, they could just go home at that point. But you at least are including them in that beginning part. So the question of whether you would require them to be there or whether it would be optional, there were people who required their essentials tutors to attend these and people who didn't. I think going from not having them come to suddenly now you're required to come is a big leap for me. So I don't think that I will require my essentials tutors to come, but I think that I will talk to them about it and see if I can get them interested in coming by choice. And, you know, if we can do it by choice for a few years successfully, we might be able to move into making it required, but I don't know. I don't know that it's something that needs to be required. We also talked about like, what do you do during the tutor meetings? And the majority of people, if not almost everyone, does not do all of the science experiments live at the tutor meetings. I used to for many years, and then I stopped because I made all those videos. I made all those videos, plus CC now has all those great videos. And I share those, I reshare those with my tutors the week of that particular science experiment. So that makes it fresh. So all I do is talk through the experiments. I show them the supplies, and I like sort of explain what will happen, but it's much, much quicker than actually doing all of the experiments. So it does give us though the chance to talk about, like, especially if I've made a certain plan and then my obesitarian tutors are like, I think we'll need to do it this way, or have you considered that the littles might, whatever. So I love that time. It's collaborative. We can come up with different ideas and make sure that it's going to work, you know, quote unquote work for all the different levels. Next, we talked about hands-on fine arts, and we just went through each quarter and we talked about different things that we do. And when it came to the great artists section, there was a lot of, you know, differing opinions on whether people stick really, really closely to what the great artist book says versus branching out a little bit. And I love that we have some flexibility within this, and there's flexibility within the drawing for tutors to find the project that's going to work well for their students. I personally always encourage people with tin whistle not to get the extra tin whistle, like little booklets or whatever that you can find on Facebook. I truly believe that what's in the guide is sufficient. I have shared, and there's a YouTube video that I show it, I have made copies of those pages in the guide, the tin whistle picture, the cycle-specific song, and the D scale ascending and descending. I photocopied those pages, one per student, and I put them in plastic pages in a little 1/2-inch binder, and I give each tutor that binder at the beginning of that quarter. And that is their extras. That's the things that they could use. They could pass out to their students. They could dry erase on them if they wanted to. That has served us super well for many, many years. So you don't need all the cutesy little booklets that are out there. It really is sufficient. So the Foundations Guide does a really great job with almost all of this art. Great artists, you need the separate book, Discovering Great Artists. I'm looking for other. Oh, another thing was there was a large chunk of people who do not utilize the Drawing with Children book. And I had brought I think I call it a cheat sheet or something, where I went through each week of the Foundations curriculum and I told what page in the Drawing with Children book would correspond and have really helpful activities. I give that to my tutors every single year. I encourage them to use the book. I love to see them use the book. You are allowed to photocopy. There is permission in the book on page XXIX that allows you to photocopy, because there are pages in there you could photocopy and give to your kids as warm-ups for some different activities. So it's a great book. So if you've been one who has kind of never used it or even doesn't like it, I would encourage you to give it a second chance. You know, Cece has recommended that we use that book, and I don't think Cece's recommendations are ever frivolous. So give it a chance, and you can find that cheat sheet that I mentioned in my Google Drive as well. Next, we talked about how we schedule sort of moving art and science around. There was a lot of different people who buy, I don't know, there were so many different things. Some people buy science supplies for everyone. Some people had, 2 bins that travel, which is what I do. Some people had 3 bins that travel. A lot of people did art in 2 different locations and had people cycle through. Some people had enough art for individuals to do it in their class. Lots of different things. So what I do is I've changed. I even changed mid-year, and I did get a chance to be like, this is a soapbox of mine. If you want to make a change mid-year, make it. Do not be afraid to make a change mid-year if you see something needs tweaking. Anyway, science, I have 2 buckets that travel around. They go to specific classes, so that me as a tutor, I know that my bucket goes to Sarah next. And so I can tell a parent, please take this to Sarah's class. And so Sarah then knows it needs to go to Amy or whatever. So it goes in a specific order, which helps them remember where it's supposed to go and helps it move around a little bit more efficiently. So that's science. Some weeks science needs to be in a stationary place, and so then we use the fellowship hall. But it's just because it's been the last few years, my tutors have preferred to do it in their rooms when they could. Some years my tutors have wanted to come out of the room. So that's a conversation you can have if you have the flexibility in your facility to have it different places. You could either have it in the room, or you have a place you could do science out of the room. Then ask your tutors, what do you prefer? Now, sometimes, some weeks I don't give them the choice, because me as the director needing to set it up, it's just too hard for me to make bins or whatever. Like, I need it to be in a centralized location. And so then I tell them that that's going to be the case. But otherwise, I would say the majority of the weeks, I'm able to I don't ask them for every single week. I just say, in general, would you prefer them to be in your room or at a science location? And for the past 2 years, they have preferred them in their rooms. So whenever I could, they would be in their rooms. Now, art, what we do for art is drawing is in your classroom, tin whistles in your classroom. Great artists is not. Great artists, we have them come to a central location, and we have 2 classes coming at the same time, but the tutors, the classes are separated. So each individual tutor is leading that time individually. So I did not say this in the time yesterday, but I do want to say it to you and remind you, this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I decided not to say it because I decided to just not make it a thing, let people manage themselves, but it's the tutor's job to lead that time. So if you have an art mom or a science mom, it is not their job to come in and lead science or art for all of the tutors. Now, I know that there are situations like I've had a tutor be out sick, and so another tutor will take both classes and lead that time. Totally fine. I've had moms who are like biologists, and so they talk a lot during one specific week. Totally fine. But to have one parent who leads like an entire quarter of art for all the classes, that's what I'm talking about. It's not that person's job. It's the tutor's job to lead it. And part of the art and science mom's job for them ought to be equipping the tutors to lead that section. That would be what I think they ought to do. So that person should be coming to the tutor meetings and equipping the tutors to lead those sections themselves. Now, I'm a big fan of those people being nearby. So if they start the art project and they're like using a material wrong, that person can be like, oh, actually it's been work, or like they've seen throughout the morning things happening and they're like, it works better when you do this. That is fantastic. But to be the one that's leading the class through the science and art, that's supposed to be the tutor. Now, if you have tutors, we did hear a lot of people yesterday saying that they would have like 2 classes come in at once, and then one tutor one week would lead both classes and the other tutor the next week would lead both classes. I have less of a problem with that. I really would be totally fine with that. I think at least that's still tutors leading the things, but that also would just totally depend on which classes are being, which classes have science at the same time. Do the tutors get along? There's a lot of factors, so it's not just a given that that's going to happen, but it's something that I would personally allow if tutors asked me, like, could we pair up and share this science time for this quarter or something? And I'd probably say yes. We also talked about how you make your rosters, how you set your, like who goes in what class. Most people, well, the number one thing, and also my number one thing, is by birthday. That's how I come up with my initial list. So I have rosters going starting in like January for the fall, for the next school year, based on birthdays alone. That helps me see kind of like where we have space. But then in the summer, I start to move kids around. This is me personally, okay? Because people yesterday did it differently. Not everybody, but there was a lot of different ways that people did it. But the way that I do it, that has served me well for many, many years, is I'm taking into account so many things. I'm taking into account the balance of boys and girls. I don't ever want any particular boy or girl to be alone in the class unless the parent is totally fine with it. And I don't even tend to ask if the parent's fine with it, unless it's just some very unusual situation. I just bump a kid up or down so that they are not alone in a class with all of the other sex. I also consider whether tutors want their own kids or not. I consider how, class dynamics in the past. I consider who will be going in a challenge together, which is basically birthdays, but not always exactly. So there's even more things, but some of them get into the nitty gritty of my particular families, that's how it should be. So anyway, it's not super easy. And so once I release, somebody yesterday was like, what do you mean by release? When I release my rosters, that means when I give them to the tutors and I say, this is your class, I do not make changes. It is a policy. I do not make changes. I've had, over my 8 years of directing, 2 or 3 parents ask, 3 to be changed, and I have declined. I will not do it. Not only do I not want to set a precedent, but I also, so much time and effort and prayer goes into making those classes. So I just pray with the families, and I encourage them to, use this year as a stretching thing, and it has always worked out. So that has been my policy. I was surprised yesterday, there were a couple directors who were like, I will absolutely move people if they ask. Another thing that was brought up was, if families join in the middle of the year, do you shuffle classes around to fit them in? My policy is absolutely not. I am not going to shuffle classes around to fit in a new family. I will fit them in where I can. So maybe for the rest of that year, one of their kids is with slightly younger kids or slightly older kids than they ideally would be in. Don't care. That's fine. That's fine. If I can fit them in closest to their age, that I will do that. But I'm not moving the people who are already there. Other directors had other opinions. Opinions. That's the key word. This is all, like, there's not diehard rules about this in our binders. So you as a director can make the decision that works well for you and your community. And somebody did point out, because one of the communities that constantly makes changes during the year, it sounds like kind of freely makes changes, they've always done it that way. The parents are fine with it. Somebody else pointed out, well, that's the culture of your community. Bingo. We as directors are helping to establish, set, maintain cultures in our community. There are lots of different cultures you could have. One of our cultures is we don't have, younger siblings in class. They are in childcare. This is one, right? Like in their community, one of the cultures is you might get moved mid-year, no big deal. That is not a culture in ours. So if I did that to our families, it would cause uproar. It would not be good, because that is not the culture that has been created in our community. So you do have to be careful when hearing from other people. You just need to be wise and know like what might work for your community and what might not, and how will this disrupt the culture. Sometimes things that have been the culture do need to change, but not always. So you just need to be wise and pray a lot about it. The last topic we talked about yesterday was keeping parents engaged. So we talked about that in Foundations and Essentials, the parent is really the student. And I think CC is starting to do a better job of really getting this message out there. And with that podcast that Lee and Robert were on, that was like 2 hours long, I can't remember the name of the guy whose podcast they were on, but they were talking about that. And that was really the first time that I had really understood that really is part of CC's vision, is that the parents are the students. And somebody even said the parents are the students and the students are the audience. So if we remind our parents of that and we say, guys, even in Foundations, you're the student, because you are learning how to do this at home with your kids. You are learning how to present the memory work. You are learning what it looks like to review at home. You are learning what it looks like to teach drawing. You are learning what it looks like to do a science experiment, whatever. I love that. And especially in Essentials, I've definitely always said this about Essentials, but the parent is more of the student during Essentials than the kid is. So parents, you need to stay engaged. And I know that sometimes there are space constraints, like a room just isn't large enough to have the parents beside the kids. But unless that is an issue, the parents should be beside the kids. They should be beside the kids. They should be raising their hand. They should be answering questions. They should be participating in the math games. They should be doing all the things with the kids. And I know by Essentials, you're tired. I know. I get it. I am too. But this is what we're here for. So it's kind of one of these suck it up kind of situations, because you're the student. So I love that. And it's, Community Day is not a time for parents to check out. It's not a break for them. They're the student. They need to be engaged. They need to participate. They need to assist the tutors. They need to not be on their phones, unless they're taking adorable pictures and videos of kids with their parents' permission. So that's what an engaged parent looks like. So we just had so many great conversations yesterday. Okay, I made a quick story to tell you the topics that I just talked about, and I realized that we didn't talk about how you make an Essentials roster yesterday. So I can't share what we talked about because we didn't talk about it, but I'll tell you what I do. It tells us in the binder to prioritize or to consider the experience level of the moms first. So that's what I do. I look at the experience level of the moms. I kind of try to even that out. So we've got experienced mom in the classes as well as new moms. So we don't have one class full of new moms and one class full of experienced moms. And then I'm also considering, are there any challenge tutors, kids in the classes? If so, I talk to that challenge director and I say, is there a parent who you would like to be in charge of your kid during Essentials? And then I make sure that those kids are in a class together. I tend to try to keep classes like, I don't want any, like if you're thinking about a Foundations class, I don't want all but one kid from a Foundations class to be in one class and then this other kid to be in the other class. Like, I don't want anybody to be left out. I try to balance girls and boys kind of. Obviously siblings are together in class with mom. So those are some of the things that I think about. I do run those by my Essentials tutors just to make sure there's no feedback. But I don't know. It's not quite as hard as Foundations is for some reason. It's just different. I don't know. I'm not coming up with a lot of stuff to share because it's just so specific to your particular situation. But, you know, the number one thing is I mix up the experience level of the moms. Day 2 is over, but I got to make these videos now because I hate talking to my phone around my family. So today in one of our sessions, we talked about hands-on science, and we mostly kind of talked about cycle 2, and we went through, kind of looked at some of the different experiments or projects and talked about different ways people have done things. And one of the main takeaways that I remember is in the 4th quarter, that's where there's like straw bridge and straw tower and egg drop, is one of the ladies shared that for the egg drop, and I kind of had already had this idea. She actually said she did this for towers, but it just reinforced that I want to do this for the egg drop. I think what we might do is have the class make a class egg protector and then send families home with kits that they can make their own egg protector at home. And then hopefully we will do the whole fire truck thing to drop them on week 24. Last time through this cycle, the egg protectors were just terrible. Terrible. Because we only did them in class. You only had 30 minutes. They had zero knowledge about making a decent one, and they were all awful. So we dropped them from a fire truck that time, and only one survived. And that was kind of disappointing. So I'm excited to let families have a crack at it. So I don't know, maybe we'll have rules, maybe we won't, but I'm excited about that. We also talked about open houses and how we do that. People do it different ways, where you have 1 or 2 days where you let everybody come. Some people shared that they will pull the parents at lunchtime, the visiting parents, and chat with them more. The way that I do it that I really, really like is from week 14 through 23 is an open house, quote unquote open house, that I post on CC Connected as an event. And I like to have 1 or 2 families a week max. And then I make sure that I visit them during the morning and I say, do you have any questions? You know, how's it going? The parents that are like, nothing, I'm fine, are usually the parents that are not interested and I don't hear back from. Parents who are interested are eager, they want to talk, and so I usually pull them out into the hallway and we chat more. And almost always they've already been talking with other moms in our community because I encourage that. So I'm just kind of adding to what my other moms have already been doing. Otherwise, we don't do anything special or out of the ordinary for open houses. Another thing that I like to mention about open houses is I've had on multiple occasions a tutor will say, oh, I feel so bad. I had a visitor today and, you know, we had a really rough, grammar time or review time. Everybody was just so wild and I feel so bad. And I always tell them, do not worry, because if our guest is really flustered by that and that's a deal breaker for them, we don't want them anyway. So just remind your tutors of that, or tutors be encouraged. My guess is most directors would agree with my sentiment there. So if they're going to come in and see some of the rougher parts of what it might be like, then and be super flustered, then this probably isn't the best program for them. We also talked about family interviews and when you do those. A lot of people did a lot of different things. Some people did phone calls. Some people meet outside of community day. One amazing director had people over to her house for dinner. She had a lot less families. Some directors give choices of meeting in person or doing a phone call. What I have done the last 2 years that has worked super, super well for me is I schedule the interviews myself. So we meet on Friday. So on Monday, I email the families who I'm going to interview that week. And I say, I'm going to be interviewing you this Friday. Here's what we're going to chat about, so that they can have an idea. And then I pull them out of class to talk to them. So scheduling it helps a few things. Number one, I can schedule it based on what is going on that week for me as a director. So whether I have visitors, whether the art or science is particularly needy that week, whatever, I can adjust what interviews I have based on what I have going on that week. So I have really, really enjoyed that. I spend 30 to 45 minutes with each family, and if it needs to go longer, it can. I tell families that I will come pull them out of class when I'm ready to talk to them. That has worked super well. Oh, the other thing that really helps is parents who are thinking about leaving or have already decided to leave but have not had the courage to tell me yet. By me scheduling it, it forces them to go ahead and tell me what they're thinking, and I don't have to spend weeks or months wondering what is going on. I haven't heard from them. So this has served me super well, and I am planning on continuing to do it. We talked for a long time about conflict resolution and relational stewardship, and to me, relational stewardship is caring for those relationships within the community, and that being a big priority for you as the FE director, to kind of have your ear to the ground for things that might be going on that need special attention or need special care, and certainly pulling extra moms in on things when they need to be. Like if there's a true need in the community that needs some TLC, maybe you have a mom already in place as a volunteer to take care of things like that. But also, if you hear of conflicts brewing, you can approach a family and maybe just check in and say, how are things going? And most likely, they will spill it to you, and you'll be able to offer insight, or just listening will often diffuse situations, and you don't even have to get to the conflict resolution stage, because the whole goal of this is just to see the body of Christ remain unified. So working towards that all the time, working towards that unity in Christ within our communities, and prioritizing that relational stewardship and using conflict resolution when we need to. So certainly encouraging people to overlook everything that they can and approach people when necessary. So those were some good chats. We talked about review and all the various games that people play during review time. We all agreed that geography is really done best in a chunk rather than piecemeal, as well as timeline. So if you're a new tutor and you're thinking about review time, consider maybe doing all of the geography review at the start of review and maybe all of the timeline at the end. Something I've seen some of my tutors do is they'll sing the timeline song while they're packing up their backpacks or something like that. So just doing those all at once instead of in the middle of a game saying, tell me timeline week 3 or something like that. And geography, just because you're using a map as well, having to go back and forth between a map during a game might just take up a little bit of extra time. So consider something like that. And be ready to support your tutors in having various ideas for games for classes that are maybe too wild. Maybe they're super littles and they're just done by the end of the day. So ideas to help them. Some quiet tasks. It is really a great thing to sometimes just have some of those extra energetic kids sitting at the table building things or playing with Play-Doh or coloring. So considering those, it doesn't have to be a game. So I find that we end up in my tutor meetings talking for a long time about review, because sometimes tutors just need a little bit of feedback about a particular situation in their class. So be ready to help with that. We also talked about how to rally parents to help. Now, ideally, parents would be eager to help, and we definitely have a lot of parents that are eager to help. But otherwise, there is a difference of opinion. There are directors who just basically expect parents to step up and do the things that need to be done each week. And then there are those of us who assign to make sure things get done. So yes, I am an assigner. I have found that is the thing that is the easiest for my brain, is to just have assignments. And what I actually started last year The main assignments are cleaning the lunchroom and recess duty, like being a parent who's supervising the kids at recess. I know people do different things. I'm just sharing what I do. But I would actually schedule the same parent to do like all of their lunchroom cleanup all in a row, like, 2 weeks in a row, and then their recess duty the next 2 weeks in a row, so that they were done. And I got feedback from a number of families who actually really liked that, because then they could not think about it again the rest of the year, rather than having them once this month and then once 3 months from now and then one more time, 6 months from the first time. So that worked super well for me. And this year I'm actually going to loop the challenged families in on these things as well. Even if they are not on campus, I'm going to invite them to return to campus to help us clean the lunchroom and supervise recess. So yes, there are lots of other ideas. A lot of directors have classes, clean the lunchroom. For my leadership team, we've discussed that before, and it just has not been what we wanted to do, and that's fine, guys. We can do what works for our community. It's no problem. Last thing we talked about in our sessions was essentials. We looked at that page that shows the combined schedule of grammar and writing. It also shows the spelling rule for the week and the vocabulary words and the literature recommendations. It's all on that sheet. It's like a double-sided, it's a big old chart. That's in the director binder, it's in the tutor binder, and it's in every single episode of Onward. And that is a fantastic page to train your tutors how to use and to train your parents how to use. It really could eliminate a weekly email from your essentials tutor if you just equip the parents to use and reference that chart. So I love that chart, and I made sure to point that out. I also wanted to make sure this room of directors was aware of those weekly sentences in the solutions manual. These are the sentences that have the script that goes along with parsing and diagramming the sentence. There was some point in the past where I showed that here on Instagram, and I had way too many people say, "What is that? I have never seen that before." That was really discouraging to me, because those are amazing. You don't have to know how to diagram a sentence. You don't have to understand English grammar to use those. My first year of essentials, that is how I learned English grammar, was just going through the scripts. So they are fantastic. So I encourage you as a director, make sure your tutors equip your parents that those things are there and how to use them, and make sure your parents really, really know that those are there and they're excellent to use and all those things. And we talked a lot about Faces of History. I know some people move it to another part of the year. We don't. We do it as written. And I just want to encourage everyone. Faces of History is kind of like a lot of challenge projects. If you just keep pace with what is laid out by CC, the plan, you will be fine. You will accomplish the paper on time. So that is what I want to say, because I know a lot of people like peter out and they don't get to the critique, the formal critique, and that's too bad. And I wish that more people would prioritize getting that done. I really think if they just kept pace with Faces of History, even if you have multiple students, keep pace with it and you'll be okay. Now, the one thing I did hear that I would like for my essentials tutors to do this year, so I'll talk to them about it, is letting families choose their character in the fall. Even if you have first-time parents who do not know what Faces of History is about, certainly don't understand those units yet, they can still pick a person. You can simply say, we're going to be researching a person. Go ahead and pick who that is and start looking for library books about that person, maybe over Christmas break, and start reading them. I would like to see that implemented, because I think it's only for the benefit of the parents and the student to kind of already have that done. So this was a fantastic time. 2 days full of practical stuff. It's like our favorite thing as directors. I only heard glowing things about this weekend. So, not weekend, these 2 days. Anyway, I've enjoyed sharing with you.